My name is Joel, and I am one of the pastors here. And we're going to be in Luke chapter 6 this morning. Luke chapter 6, if you want to go ahead and make your way over to Luke chapter 6. And as some of my helpers actually bring out some seats here, you might be wondering, I wonder what he's going to do today. Or I wonder why he has those chairs. And the simple fact of the matter is, this chair is for me. All right. And I don't know why everybody else always gets to sit down whenever I'm always the one that has to stand up. In fact, did you know in Jewish cultures that the teacher would actually normally sit down and everybody else stand up for the lesson? So, I'm just kidding, you don't have to actually stand up, but I don't know what you think of whenever you think of just a nice, relaxing, enjoyable, restful day. For me, it looks a little bit more like this, right? Maybe actually something more like, there we go. So this is probably going to go on social media, and I'm going to be in trouble. But this is kind of what it looks like, right? Whenever I'm in the house, and usually in the downstairs, I have a big screen TV right here, and I might be watching the World Cup, and there's a recliner there, and it's like this is what a nice, restful day looks like. I don't know what your happy place is, what your restful place is there, but when you think about it, what is it that you think about? For me, it's that recliner. It's like kids are not there. And for me, it's just like that evokes some type of restful attitude for me. That's usually what we think of when we think of rest. But what if I were to ask you not what does a restful day look like, but what does the Christian life look like for you? What does it mean? If you had to have a picture in your mind of what does it mean to be a Christian, probably most of us would not say it's a restful time. Because a lot of us, and rightfully so, our mind goes over to the passages about carrying your cross and doing all, but most of us, we don't really feel like our Christian life is restful. But yet today, we get to talk exactly about that. See, because whenever Jesus came, he invited us into a rest. He didn't eliminate rest. He actually invited us into a greater spiritual rest. And so this summer, we have been in the Gospel of Luke each week, but we've been really looking at some of the spiritual disciplines that Jesus displayed in his life. And so the last couple weeks, we looked at fasting and silence and solitude. This week, we get to look at what does it mean to Sabbath? What does it mean to rest? And ultimately, I'm going to try to convince you of this, is that when we rest, when we Sabbath, it is to confess that God governs the world better than we do. So we can pause and rest and trust in him. And so each week as well during this series, it's a little bit different over the summertime, and we're going to do things a little bit different over the summertime. I want to actually give you an opportunity here, not just from me, but also just here, hey, what would this practically look like for my family to do this, for me to do this in the year 2026? Because it's one thing to read about it from 2,000 years ago, but we also want to make sure that this is actually something we can actually live out as well. And so for many of these weeks, I'm actually going to be inviting one of you guys up here just to share a little bit about how you have done this as well. And so actually this week I'm going to invite my friend Nate to come on up here. Would you please welcome Nate Fair up to the stage for me? Here you go, brother. Have a seat. I know we upgraded. Last week I got to talk to my wife.
Yep.
This week you are not my wife. Okay,
but
just to clarify.
Was it an upgrade?
Yes,
No?
We did get an upgrade. We did get a rest, a little bit of a Sabbath rest here. No, if you don't know Nate and his sweet family, they're just an awesome part of our church. And one of the things that I so appreciate is that actually whenever I first got here, he actually told me just about how he and his family Sabbath. And then even more than that, they've actually invited my family into that once or twice as well. And so I got to see it firsthand experience. And I'm just so grateful for that. And I've been learning from that as well. And so I just wanted to give you guys the opportunity to hear about that as well. And so Nate, what does Sabbath look like for you guys?
Yeah, I'm Nate. We've been going to Grace Point for about 5.5 years. And Sabbath is something that I've been around the church my whole life and I've known about it and just passed over it. I'm like, that's an old Jewish thing, right? And Sabbath, what we've come to learn in our family is Sabbath means to stop. Right? And so for our family, what we figured out was we had to actually obey and stop and focus on rest, delight, and worship, right? And so for us, that looks like turning our phones off. That looks like turning the to-dos off, leaving things unfinished and actually just obeying God and taking him up on this incredible gift that is Sabbath, to stop all the stuff, because I've got 3 elementary age kids, like there's stuff to do, but to stop and just focus on rest, delight, and worship. And so on our Sabbath, our 24-hour Sabbath, we basically put it through the lens of, is it restful? Is it delightful? Or does it help us worship God? And if it doesn't do those things, we try to say no to it. That's our goal. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I would imagine that transition to starting it probably was a hard thing to transition over to.
Yeah, because it's kind of like I guess my advice for the households here is like, this isn't an individual activity. Like as the husband, if I'm like, I'm Sabbathing, I can't work today, like that's not gonna work for my family and my wife, right? So it was definitely tricky for us to get started because there was a lot of negotiating. Like I think the first time I told my wife, like, hey, I've been reading about this, I really wanna try it. She's like, cool, I just have to do more work before then. Like it was very much like how are we gonna get everything done? For like, when am I gonna mow the yard? Like when are we gonna do the practical things? And so there was definitely a lot of negotiating and saying, okay, what needs to get pulled forward? What do we need to just reset expectations? And where do we just need to say, we can stop and let unfinished work linger until Monday if we need to.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is it, what does it specifically look like for you guys on your Sabbath day?
Yeah, I think the unlock for us was finding and creating really intentional rhythms. So what we do and how I've looked through a bunch of authors and people that have kind of reclaimed some of the old traditional ways. We actually start Sabbath at dinner on Saturday nights. So we start with a dinner and we make it like our best meal, our favorite meal, the one like the comfort food, go-to feast, awesome meal. And then we always have dessert. And some of this, honestly, was like we wanted our kids to be pumped about this. So if we made it like just another thing, a task, they weren't going to buy in. And so we really wanted this to be like, man, there's brownies and ice cream and really good food and burgers and like everything good that we love. And so we started it with dinner. And that was how we chose to start Sabbath. And then at that meal, we did a little bit of ceremony and liturgy. So I would read a liturgical prayer over the family, and then we go around and bless the kids and give them a blessing. And then we enjoy the meal. And from that point, all the devices are off. We have good music playing, usually candles lit. Like we kind of make it an experience. And from there, we spend 24 hours where it's really like sinking into like books and napping and board games and great conversation. And then Sundays we come here. A lot of times we serve, we worship. That's part of the worship part. Like hanging out with fourth graders is a part of my Sabbath a lot of times, but that's a part of the worship of it. And then we go back and nap and chill. And then Sundays, we kind of try to, like, again, the rhythm of reintegrating. So we sit as a family and we try to have like some kind of family meeting that's like, what's going on this week? We have a meal together. A lot of times we watch a movie to kind of like just re-enter the life of screens and busyness and all that. And that really has provided us this thing where like our whole family's engaged in this. It's not just like, well, mom and dad want to do whatever. They're going to make us do this boring thing. Like we're making it joyful and delightful for everyone and really connected. And I can tell you, I mean, you could find my kids and ask them, like, a lot of times they so look forward to Sabbath. It's this thing that they're pumped about. And so it's been an incredible gift for our whole family to get to experience that and go, man, what a life-giving day of the week.
Yeah, awesome. And last question would be, if there's somebody out here that's like, yeah, I want to do that, or I want my family to do that, any advice on how to even get started?
I mean, I think setting up the delight part of it was a big unlock for us. Also just communicating on the front end. Like we had to navigate. There was a couple times people, in-laws, whatever, wanted to get a hold of us and our phones were off. And it was a little like, okay, we're going to have a little bit of weirdness here that we're off the grid for 24 hours. And yet I love that quote because the biggest lesson I've had on Sabbath is like, there is a God and it's not me. And so I can leave everything undone and like, nothing falls apart. As a matter of fact, what I've learned is like everything keeps going pretty well. So like I don't actually need to feel this need to control. I can rest in the goodness of God who has everything under control. And those 25 missed text messages, most of them resolve themselves by Sunday night. So when we get back into life, it's actually really restful. I think the thing, like, take God up on the dare, right? Like he gives us this gift that is Sabbath, and very few people take advantage of it and say, hey, this is an intentional thing. Take God up on it and actually rest, make it delightful. Because one part of my story, we started Sabbath, and about a month in, I kind of stumbled into the craziest work situation I've been in a long time. Like crazy long weeks, whatever. And like, I remember being like, what a gift God gave me that I had 24 sane hours every week. Like Saturday night to Sunday night, I could shut it all down and say, God, you got this. And honestly believe that like that was part of how God sustained me in a really hard season. And so I'm just so thankful of like, man, God, you're so good to give us that gift and shift that idea from like, oh, well, I have to do this, kind of like my idea of Sabbath before, maybe was like a lot of things I didn't want to do, into something really delightful and joyful. So I would just like dare you to go try it, right? Set aside 24 hours and do it, because it's just the best gift that God's given my family.
Awesome. Thank you, Nate. Yeah. Hey, would you give Nate a round of applause? Thank you, brother. We bring that up to show you that you can do these things, that they're not just something that was done by 2,000-year-old rabbis, but they're actually something that you and your family can do as well. Hey, do you got Luke chapter 6? Let's go ahead and stand in honor of God's word here today. Luke chapter 6, we're going to read verses 1 through verses 10 here. It says, on a Sabbath, while he was going through the grain fields, his disciples plucked and ate some heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands. But some of the Pharisees said, why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath? And Jesus answered them, have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and took and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those with him. And he said to them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and he was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was withered. And the scribes and the Pharisees watched him to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath, so that he might find a reason to accuse him. But he knew their thoughts, and he said to the man with the withered hand, come and stand here. And he rose and he stood there. And Jesus said to them, I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save a life or to destroy it? And after looking around at them, he said to him, stretch out your hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored. But they were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. So to rest is to confess that God governs this world better than we do, that God governs the world better than we do, and he is going to invite us into that on this dare. I love it how Nate put it, on this dare of just saying, do you actually trust me enough to simply just rest in me? And it starts out in Luke chapter 6 here. It says on a Sabbath. Literally in the Greek, it says on a second Sabbath. And this probably was the second one after the Passover. And so this was in the early springtime when all the grain was at their highest point. Jesus now is walking through a field, and he is with all of his disciples. Now, nothing in the Bible, there's not a single word in the Bible that's wasted or was put there without a purpose. And so the fact that this was on the Sabbath is incredibly important to the rest of the story. So Jesus walking through a field, and while he is walking through a field, some of his disciples simply just reach down to the wheat, to the grain, and grab off some of that grain, rub it in their hands is all they would do there, and kind of get all the wheat off there, all the chaff off, and then there was just a little piece of grain left in it. So they would grab a few, rub them together, eat it. Grab a few, rub them together, eat it. If you've ever just kind of gone grazing through a shopping mart or something like that, I don't think you should, but that's what they were doing right there. They were just going through, getting in a little bit, eating it as they were going on. But the Pharisees somehow just pop up in the middle of the field. Now, whenever I first read this is where my mind went to. Do y'all remember that scene from Jurassic Park? Whenever they were like running through the tall grass? Some of the older folks might remember that. I was going to show you this scene, but I was like, some parents might not want their kids to see people being eaten by dinosaurs early in the morning. But like they're running through the field and then the dinosaurs are, attacking them. This is kind of how I picture it, right? So Jesus is walking through the fields with his disciples. All of a sudden, some of them eat, and then the Pharisees pop up out of nowhere. It's like, gotcha. It's like, where did they even come from, it seems like. But apparently they were just sitting there watching and saying, ha, we caught you. You did work on the Sabbath day. You did work. Now, I just told you all that they were doing was walking through a field and occasionally grabbing some grain, rubbing it in their hands and eating it. Does that feel like work to you? No, it shouldn't. But yet for the Pharisees, what was happening in their mind is that they had taken this one rule, this one commandment, the Sabbath day, and not only did they have that one rule, then they ended up making 39 different categories of work. So from that one rule, they have created now 39 categories, and this one, even just grabbing and getting some grain off, they would say, yeah, you're threshing the wheat, you're bringing in the crops by doing that. You have broken the law. Now, this wasn't actually breaking the law at all for Jesus. Jesus was right there. He's the one who wrote the law. He would know. But yet, this is what they've done. So much so that now they have made 39 categories. And then if you were to go back and check some of the Jewish writings of that day, you would actually find that they had a book of 156 pages, front and back, explaining exactly what you could do and what you can't do on the Sabbath day. 156 pages. That now starts to not feel like a restful thing anymore. It starts to feel a lot more like this is a bunch of rule book. This is going to be the most stressful day of the week for me. Even if you go over to Israel right now, they have things, for instance, for the Orthodox Jewish people, they'll have like things like Shabbat elevators. And what that is that apparently in order to like hit the button on the elevator, it would cause a fire, an ignition switch. And starting a fire is against the Sabbath. And so instead what would happen is that you would actually go into an elevator inside of Israel and it would stop at every single floor all the way up. So if you're on the 10th floor of your hotel, you got to stop on every single floor all the way up and because apparently just reaching out and touching a button now is too much work. In the same way, like you can't travel over a certain distance. In Jesus' day, it meant then that they would actually set up all these little exceptions to the rules. So you could only travel about half a mile on a Sabbath day journey. But after a half a mile, what they would do is every half a mile, they would set up a little hut and you'd go and sit in the hut and you'd say a little prayer and said, now this is my house. And then you'd walk another half a mile to the next little hut. And they made a system for the Sabbath, the day of rest, that now said, you better work hard to keep this rest. And they completely missed the point. And so Jesus and his disciples, as they were just simply walking through a field, grabbing a few pieces of grain, not working at all, and yet they said, ha, we caught you, you are working. And so in verse 3, Jesus answered them, have you not read what David did? This is 1 Samuel 21. Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and took and ate of the bread of presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those with him. Now Jesus was a Jewish rabbi, and so he answers in a very rabbi way. Number one, he also answered in a very, I love it, kind of a passive-aggressive way. He turns to the Pharisees, the guys who actually memorized a good chunk of the Old Testament, and he's like, hey guys, haven't you read that part? That's like going up to a pastor and be like, haven't you read the book of Romans? Like, he just kind of pushes in on it. It's like, haven't you read that part in Samuel? Whenever David, and this is a story real quick, Saul was chasing after David. David comes up to a priest, and normally the priests, after every single week, they would create bread that they would have inside the tabernacle. But after the end of the week, they'd pull out that bread and they would eat the bread. Now, this was specifically reserved for the priests. Only the priests could eat it. But yet, whenever David was on the run for his life, he and his men went to the priest and said, but do you have any food? The priest gave it to him, and he ate. And Jesus now is showing, no, there's a greater law. There's this law of goodness that transcends this, that I am able, just like David was able to overcome that law, I am able to fulfill it and overcome it. And so he looks at them, and he says to them, in verse 5, a very profound verse, and he said to them, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Now, this is profound in many different ways, but number one, the Sabbath didn't actually start in the Ten Commandments, right? The Sabbath goes all the way back to the book of Genesis because God created the world in 6 days, and then what happened on the seventh day? He rested. And so for them, there was one Lord of the Sabbath, and that was God the Father, right? Now Jesus says, I have authority over the Sabbath. The Sabbath was always mine. And he is declaring himself to be God. But then actually in another gospel, this story is so important that it's mentioned in 3 different gospels. We've been sticking in Luke for this summer series. But in the Gospel of Mark, he actually adds in one extra line, and I think it's just so important as we start to understand the Sabbath for us as well. In Mark chapter 2, verse 27, in this exact same story, he adds this line, and he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Meaning this, it's like you guys think that your whole entire life, the whole point is just to try to keep the Sabbath. He's like, no, I gave you the Sabbath. I gave you rest for your own good. I gave it as a gift. And so when we skip the Sabbath, we miss one of God's greatest gifts in our life. When we skip taking a rest, we miss one of God's greatest gifts in our lives. We're not good at resting. I'll be honest, like I feel a little bit like a hypocrite for myself because I'm not very good at any of this. As Americans, we aren't very good at taking rest. I looked it up here this week. Did you know that as Americans, we work almost 3 more weeks than Canadians? Figures, right? Almost 4 more weeks than people in the United Kingdom, 2 weeks more than people in Italy, 9.5 weeks more than Sweden and Norway, and 11 weeks more than Germany, and a full 52 more weeks than the French. I'm just kidding. No. No, we aren't good at rest. We work ourselves to death. Where we get up, and we feel like, man, I got to get up, I got to get going, I got to go to work. We work long hours. The majority of probably don't take all the vacation days, myself included, that have been given to us. We got things to do. But here's the problem. When we feel like, man, I cannot rest, you know what's just happening? It's us taking God off of his throne and saying, actually now, I'm God. God, I don't think that you can do all of it yourself because if I take a day off, then the important things aren't going to get done. So God, please get down from your throne. I need to get up there for a minute. And it's not until we realize, you know what? If I take a day off, God is still ruling and reigning. And you know what? I'm not that important. And I can just learn to trust him. And it's this invitation now, and I love how Nate put it, it's this invitation to rest, and not just to rest, but also to delight in him and also to worship him, because this is what the Sabbath is. It's not just a day for you just to sit back on the recliner and watch the game in the recliner. No, it's a day for you, yes, to rest, but also it's giving you time in our busy, busy lives to lift up your eyes and say, God, I'm just going to worship you today because you have been so good to me. And I just need to stop and I need to rest because if I just keep going and keep going and keep going, I won't ever take that time to stop and rest. And so whenever we skip this time simply to rest, then we skip out on one of God's greatest blessings in our life. It goes on to say in Luke chapter 6, it says, on another Sabbath, so in a few weeks down the road, probably, he entered the synagogue, and look at that. He goes and he worships God in the same way that Sabbath will often include coming to church here so that they could worship. This rabbi, Jesus, goes inside the synagogue and was teaching. And a man was there whose right hand was withered. And the scribes and the Pharisees watched him to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath so that they might find a reason to accuse him. I love this. Like how dumb are the Pharisees right now? Like they're sitting there and they see a man and that has come in with a withered right hand, and this one feels very much close to home because if you've been coming the last few weeks, you know, like I broke this arm really, really bad, and so I'm like, I get this, right? And so this man comes inside, and he's just sitting there, and the Pharisees look at him, and then they see Jesus, and they're like, don't you do it, Jesus. Like, you better not do it. Like, they're thinking all of this, like, I can't believe he's going to do it, isn't he? He's going to do it, and he better not do it. And then Jesus, knowing their thoughts, I love that in verse 8, but he knew their thoughts. They weren't saying it. He could just see it. He had the mom superpower right there. And he said to the man with the withered hand, come and stand here. So that man gets up. And he stands there. And I was thinking even this week, like one of the doctors, whenever I broke my arm back around Easter, he's like, yeah, 100 years ago, you would have just had a lame hand the rest of your life. And I was thinking, it's like, man, he's probably like, what is going on? Like, if this man actually came into the synagogue, I don't think he was actually just looking to be healed. He was actually looking just to worship God. But then he encountered God. And what an opportunity is it for us as well. That we're not looking for healing, we're actually just going to look for Jesus. But here's the amazing thing, when we get closer to Jesus, we can find our healing as well. And he comes up, and he stands next to him, standing beside Jesus. And he rose and he stood there. In verse 9, and Jesus said to them, I ask you, is it lawful on the Sabbath day to do good or to do harm, to save a life or destroy it? See, he's going to ask him a question. Always in the Sabbath, there's always some exceptions that were made inside the law of God that said, yes, you shouldn't work, but if you see somebody that is actually sick and about ready to die, go and help that person. Go and do good. Go and give life on the Sabbath, because that's what rest is all about. And so the Sabbath is more than rest. It is delighting in God. It is delighting in God. I had no idea Nate was going to say that his Sabbath was all about delight. But it's a good reminder that for us, when we take time to rest, yes, we rest physically, but we look and we enjoy all the gifts that God has given us. We give thanks for it, and we delight in him. And after looking around at them, all he said to them, he said, stretch out your hand. And he did so. And his hand was restored. But they were filled with fury and discussed one another what they might do to Jesus. See, Jesus saw this time of Sabbath rest as a time to give life. And this is the same true for us as well. Is that this moment of rest that God has baked inside of our calendar, every single culture has always gone by the 7-week calendar. There's only been a couple cultures in all the history of the world that have tried and failed to do something else. But there's this rhythm here that God has put in, and I think that rhythm just reminds us that we need to take time. We need to take time and say, I can't do it all myself. God, I need you. See, rest reminds us of a gospel of grace, not performance. It says, I can't do all of this. Even when I try, I can't do it. So instead, I need to learn how to rest in God today. That's not really how most of our lives usually look like, does it? For most of our lives, rest is not part of the equation, because we got kids that need to get to soccer practice. We got a job on the line, and we need to get that promotion. We got all sorts of things in the HOA. And we never take time. And we never take time to stop and worship him, to stop and get strength from him. But what if this is the thing that you're missing? Not another thing, but one less thing, so that you can focus on the most important thing. Let me just illustrate it this way as we start to close up shop. Can I ask my buddy Chris to come on up here? I got another friend up here. Hey, would you please welcome Christopher? Amen. Thank you. Yeah, I want you to, you don't get to sit down. You have to stand up. I'm sorry. Here's what happens oftentimes. Christopher is still a young man, but early on in his career, recently finished college a couple years ago, right? A few years ago. And now well on his way. He's starting a business, busy guy, doing lots and lots of things. And so building houses too. Okay, yeah, you're doing all of it. And so here's what often happens. Christopher, you just stay there and finish this sermon for me. I'm just kidding. No, yeah. So here's what often happens. See, whenever you're a young man and you first, you graduate from high school and all of that, and then you go off to college, and now what felt like maybe a hard life whenever you were still a young person, now you have a few more obligations. You have a few more things that's dependent on you. And so maybe, Christopher, maybe someday you'll go back even to school again or something, and this is going to represent a little bit more schooling. There we go. And that's still not that much of a burden for Chris, because Chris is a strong man. Look at this. He's showing off a little bit. Keep showing off, buddy. But then all of a sudden, as time goes on, one day, he's now going to start to get a job. And he already has a job. And now there's going to be all sorts of spreadsheets and all sorts of things that he has to keep track of. Please hold that for a second. And now he's trying to balance a few more things, right? He's starting to balance a few more things, and let's be honest, Chris is in really good shape right now, but brother, it just goes downhill from here, and so you just got to do some work, and so don't drop my computer, but here, you can close it if you need to, but figure this out here, because you still got to go to the gym every so often and do some work, and gotta figure it out, man. It's gonna be busy. Yeah. And now, there's a little bit more of a burden. And I think all of us kind of know this. I'm just going to keep jogging a little bit slower, make them really feel this. And we remember this time. As we start to get older, there's all of a sudden a little bit more burden and a little bit more burden and a little bit more burden. And now, all of a sudden, he has the audacity to go and buy a home. There we go. And now, this life that didn't really feel like, there's actually stuff in here. I thought about putting toilet paper in, and I was like, no, he can handle it. And what felt like a good and easy life, without us realizing it, all of a sudden now, is starting to become more and more and more burdensome. And then one day, Christopher is not married yet, but one day he's going to meet a wife. And she's gonna come with baggage. All right, so I'm just gonna leave that there. And then actually, if everything goes all right, and everything really goes good, then at the end of the day, he's gonna have a baby as well. And this guy looks just like you, bro.
Spitting image.
And this is actually how a lot of our lives look, doesn't it? Trying to balance school, trying to balance home ownership, trying to balance kids, trying to balance our relationship, trying to balance everything, try to be healthy. Oh, and by the way, did you not have time to read your Bible this week, bro? And we wonder why we're exhausted and tired. And Chris is a strong guy and he can hold this for a little bit, but not forever. And neither were we designed to. And what if Christian life was not actually supposed to look like this? What if you can put all that down, brother? What if Jesus invites us to a type of rest? Take that backpack off. And it says, hey, have a seat. What if Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and you can find rest. And this is what the Christian life. Yes, for 6 days, yeah, we gotta work hard. I'm not saying you can just drop all your obligations, drop everything that God has given. No, there's a reason for that, but yet you can't do that forever. Some of you have tried, I've tried. I'm telling you, I'm a hypocrite in this. I've put myself in the hospital sometimes. And it's not until I realized, you know what? I'm not strong enough to carry all of this, but God is. God is able to carry all of that. So what if I instead just lay that at his feet and I come and find the rest that my soul desperately needs? This is the invitation for all of us. Thank you, brother. You can have a seat. Do you need to find your rest in him? Do you need to be reminded it's never been actually about everything that you can do? The Sabbath rest has been an invitation to remind us of what God has already done for us. And we can pause and think about that. Let me challenge all of us to take time this week. Find a day. I know I can't challenge everybody on the same day because we all have different schedules. I get that. It's not about the day. It's about taking time to rest. So I encourage you, though. I'm challenging you, every single one of us. We have resources on gpc.life. You can look that up as well and find more information and be challenged by that. But I challenge every single one of us to take a day of rest this week with you and your family, to say we will rest and delight in God today. Hey, let's take a moment. Lay anything down at Jesus' feet that we might need to before we close out this service. Let's just take a moment of rest and prayer here today. If there's anything that you came in with today that you are still having a burden on you, that you'd say, man, I just can't carry this and I need somebody else help. And we'll have people around as well that would love to pray with you, love to talk with you. Father, I pray that you would just help us find our rest in you. That we'd be reminded that we can't do it all ourselves, but you've already done it all. Lord, that we could get that life that we need from you so that we can give that life away to others as well. Let's just take another moment before we close out shop today.